Alright, so new ban list, new selection pack, and there's a Duelist Cup coming in a couple days. The first Duelist Cup of the 2025 season, even though it's very clearly still 2024, and there's very likely going to be another Duelist Cup in 2024 that counts for 25 that counts for 2025 season, so that's half the Duelist Cups for 2025 in 2024, but whatever, I don't make the rules, Konami does. So yeah, let's do a tier list for the current Master Duel meta and the best decks that you can play for Duelist Cup. And you can see I've tried to cover a lot of decks here. And obviously, if there's a deck in here I didn't cover, please let me know in the comments and I'll respond to you, giving my best opinion on what I think about the deck. And if you disagree with me on any of these decks, of course, also feel free to discuss with it. Leave a comment and we can discuss about it in the comments. So first off, well, I mean, Fire King's sake, I'm just gonna put this right here. It's no surprise. Nobody. I don't think anybody's really gonna be contentious with this. A Fire King Snake Eyes being the best deck in Master Duel, so I'm just gonna leave this right here. It's been this way for 3 months now. I think everyone already knows enough about this deck and knows what it does and all that stuff. So let's cover some more interesting stuff, like the new cards in the pack. So we have Gen X, and yeah, man, this deck is wow. What this deck is not great. Basically, I would not recommend you playing past stage 1 with this. You might even find the struggle to get to Duelist level 19 with this deck. But if I were to describe this deck, it would be like a deck that has all the. It's like Flu. Except it has all the weaknesses of Flu and none of the advantages. It's very vulnerable to hand traps, so it can lose to one hand trap very often. In fact, if you just literally hand trap the Link 1 or imperm the Link 1 and it resolves, they will pass turn, most likely. And yeah, it normal summons a lot, but unlike Flu, it's there's no Gen X Advent of Adventure or Gen X Swallow's Calorie that lets you at least dodge imperm like Flu does. And yeah, it doesn't even play well into Max C because at least Flu, right? Flu doesn't have to special summon. After all your normal summon, you're still gonna have to special summon and make Sneakers after your normal summon. So this isn't even even though this is a deck that normal summons a whole lot because of Link 1, it still doesn't play that well into Max C. And yeah, boy, man, it's good if your opponent plays no hand traps. That's all I'll say about it. But given this format, that's probably not something you can rely on. So anyway, the other next new deck from the new pack is Ancient Gear. So Ancient Gear is actually I wouldn't say it's like great or anything. Like I'm not gonna call it like a contender or like a deck that's really good for grinding in stage 2 of the Duelist Cup. But as far as blind second decks go, this is about. Sorry, I just realized that I misnamed this tier. This tier was supposed to be Rogue after tier 3. My bad. So, Ancient Gear. As far as blind second decks go, this is about as good as it gets, honestly. You can even argue this might even be the best blind second deck. Since if there's one thing this deck isn't lacking, it's damage. This deck just does damage. It's funny people called this budget Tenpai in the past, although the funny thing is, it's always been that this deck in the TCG was always more expensive than Tenpai was. So in reality, Tenpai was just budget Ancient Gear. But yeah, it has like similar concepts in that you have you're gonna blind second. Obviously, you're gonna blind second. I don't think this deck is really it's really not that great as a deck that goes first. So I wouldn't attempt that. Although maybe if there's something you can do with the Master Duel ban list that lets it go first better, maybe that's worth looking into. But I'm looking at this as a blind second deck, and it has probably the highest damage output of any blind second deck right now. It's to the point where you can easily use bodies to go into an Appaloosa to play around certain hand traps and still do more than enough damage. It's I'm not sure if you can get away with running Plot of Prosperity like Tenbai does, but you don't need to because you have 3 thrusts and you have like Urgent Schedule, which is like an insane card for blinding second. So you have all the available board breakers at your disposal. So yeah, that's ancient gear, and this Sunseed Genius, uh, Loci, however the hell you pronounce this card, I don't generally know, but yeah, there's a lot of plant support in the new pack. There's Ragnaraka cards, there's Aroma cards, and you can build this one of two ways. You can build this like a 60 card pile with every single plant engine in here, and the Therions. So you're basically running Rika, Ragnaraka, Sun Avalon, Aroma, Therion, Naturia plants with possibility Cactus Bouncer, and then you just go off, you do this combo where you just auto win going first if you resolve your combo. But obviously in a 60 card pile, it's sometimes there's consistency issues, sometimes you don't. You draw the Loci less, obviously, but the Loci less. You also have much less room for non-engine. And then the other way to build it is just a straight up like a one card combo, like you're building like a Plant Cybers deck, where you're just focusing on one card starters in the new Ragnaraka Evil Seed and the Sun Avalon Sunseed Loci, and then those get you a combo where it's not a super FDK, but you're still getting 4 to 5 interruptions off of one card, which should be enough because you're also running 14 plus hand traps in your deck because you have room for that since you're not running all the different plant edges. But yeah, both ways I think are viable ways to play plant right now, and the deck definitely got better from the ban list. So I'm gonna put it in like tier 3. It's gonna be I don't think it's gonna be like too great. It's not like the best deck or anything, and certainly there's like issues with it, such as which way you build it. If you build like it as a one card combo deck, you don't have access to maybe the best extenders, so sometimes it's hard to play through hand traps and hard to play through boards. But if you're playing like the 60 card builds or stuff like that, then you're just not gonna see non-engine nearly as often, and you're still probably gonna lose even though you have more extenders, you're still probably gonna lose if your opponent full combos you and you don't have any of those. So yeah, it's like a viable deck, I think, but maybe not the best. And Lightsworn. So here's the thing about Lightsworn is that there's been some testing people have done with Lightsworn and Tier Elements, which is probably the deck that people pair Lightsworn the most with, and a lot of people have come to the conclusion that the Lightsworn cards just make Tier worse. Like, it's the Lightsworn cards take up a lot of deck slots in a deck that already, is struggling for flex spots as it's in a deck like Tier, and frankly, not all of the cards are even good to draw. Like, Dragonling is nice, but in order for Dragonling to be a good card, you have to run a bunch of bricks, like a bunch of wolves, and like Felice and stuff like that, and then it's not, you can't even use it to special summon itself if you don't have another Lightsworn engine, so you have to run a bigger Lightsworn engine. It's like, I'm not sure, but like, playing Lightsworn with Tier might make Lightsworn better, but it makes Tier worse. And as far as pure Lightsworn goes, I'm not sure how viable pure Lightsworn is. There's Lightsworn Runic, which has the problems with, which again will have the problems with every other Runic deck, but on top of being a deck that's slightly worse than the Max C compared to other Runic decks. So yeah, I'm not sure how the proper way to build Lightsworn is right now. There's an FTK build. Don't think the FTK build is the best either. Gonna be honest. That's more like a bot deck in my opinion. Yeah, Dragonlink. So Dragonlink, biggest winner off the ban list. 3 Druid's Worm and Wyver Burster is back, and those help immensely. Druid's Worm is the second best Bestial, especially it's great for going second, because going second, you Druid's Worm something, now you have the Druid's Worm body on the field, and now you just link it off, or you synchro it off into something like a Chaos Angel or Baron, and now you get to remove another one of your opponent's disruptions. So it's like the one Druid's Worm traded for 1 to 2 disruptions by itself. So that's great. And then obviously the bigger thing is Wyver Burster. Now Chaos Space is a card you can run again. So not only do you have like your best starter back, you also have more access to Lubellion, because you just have 2 cards that can search Lubellion if you already have the access to the baby dragons. And the baby dragons being extenders that don't cost a normal summon means that you are so much better playing into Disruption, since a lot of times before, if you relied on black metal, people would hit your red eyes before it could revive black metal, and then suddenly it's like you're really hard at playing through removal, because now you need to get 2 more bodies on the field after already using your normal summon in order to combo. But now, 1 baby dragon, 1 chaos base, 1 safer just gets you the bodies needed to do full combo already. So yeah, this is I would say it's a solid tier 3 deck. That it's not among the best decks, but it's right below them. And also, if Bystials ever get better in the future, then I could see this deck rising up, because a large portion of like how good Dragon Link is has to do with how good Bystials are as well. And while Bystials are good against a lot of decks for this format, unfortunately the best deck of this format is Fire King Snake Eyes. And Bystials, while they can hit the IP Mask Arena, that's pretty much all they hit from that deck. So if you just open a bunch of Bystials versus Fire Kings, you're still not in a favorable position, unfortunately, like you would be against some other decks that we will get to later. But yeah, Dragon Link, it's back now. It's no longer dwelling in rogue tier. This is one of the better, actually, like tier 2 to 3 decks that's in the game. And then Yubel. So Fire King Snake Eyes was, people agree on, is the best deck. I'll put Yubel as the second best deck. And here's the thing, is that Yubel is still worse than Fire King Snake Eyes. I think all like the pro players and all the people that play at Worlds or play high-end rated duels agree with this. But the big difference is that Fire King Snake Eyes is just a much better deck at going second than Yubel is. Like straight up, because it runs the Broken Fire engine, so it has Bonfires, it has Populars and Snake Eyes cards, it has Diabellstar, which is also free, and then it's also a 1-card full combo, doesn't require a normal summon. And then on top of that, you have Kirin's to dodge interruption, and like it's great. You can like win. It's not unheard of to win games opening just engine cards with Snake Eyes. With Yubel, that's a different story, because if you open engine cards only with Snake Eyes, or with Yubel, first of all, that means you probably open a few bricks, because Yubel does play a few of those. And secondly, like your normal summons, like your Dark Bending Beast, are way more vulnerable to removal. Like even getting something like your Dark Bending Beast SP banished for the turn hurts so immensely, because now you just wasted your normal summon, and now you have to get like 2 bodies to be able to extend, and like you can't, the Spirit Gates to do anything because you don't have the Dark Bending Beast never hit the grave. It's just, yeah. But I mean, obviously going first, this is probably the best deck in the game, even better than Fire King Snake Eyes, and that's even before you decide to run stuff like Yubel. So because you still have the massive advantage going first, and then going second, you still have while maybe it's not the best at playing through disruption, you still have alt win cons that don't require you to break the entire board. So like you don't have to like open on attack through a clear field. You can just get them down to like 1 big monster, just attack 3 times with Nightmare Pain, and then that wins. And also you have lots of room for non-engine, so it's still good. Probably the second best deck. I just think Fire King Snake Eyes, and most people think Fire King Snake Eyes is better than Yubel. And the next best deck, honestly, this might be a controversial take, but I really like Rescue Ace. I think Rescue Ace is just a slightly worse version of Fire King Snake Eyes, in my opinion. But like a slightly worse version of Fire King Snake Eyes is still better than 90% of decks in the game. And especially this deck has advantages over Fire King, which is stuff like Max C affects Rescue Ace less than Fire King. Shifter affects Rescue Ace less than Fire King. Droll affects Rescue Ace less than Fire King. These are blowout hand traps that people play against Fire King Snake Eyes, but against the second best fire deck, Rescue Ace, it's not as great, and Rescue Ace can bounce off the Rescue Ace pretty easily. And yeah, the only thing is it's a bit less consistent because the engine requirements are bigger, so you have a bigger deck size and like stuff like that. Also, if people play evenly and board breakers actually hurt you Rescue Ace more than it hurts the 2 decks above it, Fire King Snake Eyes and Yubel. So I'm not gonna call it better, but I think it's underrated. I think it's definitely a top 5, arguably top 3 deck in the game. And then the next few decks are like decks that are contention for tier 2. You could argue they're either at the in tier 2 or at the top tier 3, because I don't quite know where to put all of these. But I think these are like the 3 top decks in my opinion. And then later on you have stuff like Pearly, which so Pearly always does well with the Master Duel stats. It's, I believe, the highest win rate deck on Master Duel ladder once again, and it's been that way for pretty much the entire time it's had E Pearly Noir. So yeah, it's just people don't really play this deck, even though people are not running outs to expert Gnar. There's never been a time when people have been running less outs to Gnar. People like Snake Eyes decks don't even run Courier Card as a search target anymore. Like the average deck actually just does not even expect to play against an expert Gnar. And also, drawing 4 to 6 cards in the standby phase in a game where you can draw into max C seems fine. There's also Black Goat's Laugh. It's out now, and that's like a decent card for Pearly because you can use it as a discard engine as well as a normal trap. Like, just discard it for your Pearly spells, and that gets you an extra disruption for free. So yeah, I think Pearly is well positioned. It's a very well positioned in the meta. It's just sometimes going second is a bit harder if you don't open streets, so it has issues there. It's not the perfect deck, but I think it's still a good deck. And tier. So I don't know where I've placed tier all over the place in the past few months. I feel like I should be placing tier in tier 2 now, because not because of the World Championship performance, mind you. I'm not taking the World Championship results at all into this tier list, because that the World Championship was a completely different meta, shared deck list. The fact that every deck that was not Fire King Snake Eyes got a buff because you weren't allowed to play, 5 or 6 Fire King Snake Eyes in your deck because of the shared card pool. So obviously other decks are going to be more represented than they would normally be in a ladder meta. And obviously everyone knows tier did well in the World Championship. But even outside of that, this is one of the decks where its engine is actually pretty decent at playing into the Fire King's end boards, usually. And although this deck doesn't have the most room for non-engine and definitely does not run the most hand traps, it plays board breakers instead, which I generally feel are worse than hand traps, which is that's why I'm placing the hand trap decks over the board breaker decks. But still, as far as board breaker decks go, tier is probably among the best. And going first, it still sets up a board that's good enough to win. I'm not even talking about the 60 card horrors terrorist piles, if you will. We'll get to those. I'll get to those shortly. But yeah, just straight up tier. Its end board is extremely hard to play through, again, if you don't open hand traps versus it, because just having a fusion or two, plus a couple tier traps, plus snow and shufflers in the grave, no single board breaker is dealing with that, and that's enough to beat most decks. Now, going second to Yubel with tier can be a little rough, because Yubel puts up the strongest board in the game, which is full of monster negates, and obviously tier, if you negate all of the tier names fusing effects plus Reinhardt or stuff like that, then it becomes hard to get your engine going. And Super Poly is kind of weird versus Yubel. It kind of doesn't really work at all versus their end board until they use the Phantom, but they have no real incentive to use the Phantom early, because they probably have a Rage and a Appaloosa on the field too. But yeah, other than Yubel, sometimes if Snake Eyes does a line that ends on Appaloosa and doesn't play into Super Poly, that can also be rough. But if they do, the general board, if they do play into Super Poly, it's a lot more manageable, that you can actually be able to play through with tier. And I guess I should mention the 60 card Horus tier piles now. I think these are funny. They're the ones that are like the one Jesse played at the World Championship, and also the ones that have been topping getting a few top 100 spots in the previous Duelist Cups and the World Championship qualifiers. I think it's a cool deck. I think if you're gonna play a pile deck, maybe the 60 card terrorist pile is probably the best pile deck you can play. But it's still, I think pure tier is the 40 card version is just better, more consistent. Because just mathematically, right? You're gonna get better milling in a 40 card deck than a milling a 60 card deck. And the 60 card deck, for as many starters that it also adds quite a lot of bricks, and it has even less room for non-engine. And it's just yeah, sometimes you summon Medora Pass because you brick that much. But yeah. And the other thing is the Lightsworn hat cards also, I don't believe going to the 60 card tier piles with Horus either, because the Snake Eyes cards are just better than the Lightsworn cards for that. Because the Snake Eyes cards, one card makes it curious, which gets you your engine going already. So like you don't need to add all the Lightsworn cards for that, in my opinion. And it's yeah, this is gonna it's gonna be tilting play against this deck when they open grass and you don't have Ash for it, but it is what it is. And Branded is another deck that's, I don't know. I think Branded is worse than Tier currently, because it's like a same style of deck as Tier, which is not very many hand traps, runs a lot of board breakers. Except I feel like Branded is more inconsistent than Tier, just because of the limitation of Master Duel. It has like all the Branded Fusion 1 and like the Alibur hits and like the Branded opening hits and stuff like that. And then you have the deck still can't really. It's still really hard to play a 40 card Branded deck. A lot of decks still go up to like maybe even 60 cards, and then you have then you have the consistency issues with a 60 card deck. And then yeah, also sometimes like Tier can lose to hand traps sometimes, like an Imperm on Kit hurts, but an Imperm on Alibur also hurts if you don't open the Fusion Deployment or Cartesia to help dodge the Imperm. And without the locks, like without Ito or Gimmick Puppet, that's not really, trying to lock your opponent with Sanctifier isn't really as great now. I mean, sure, Jowgen exists, but in my opinion, I think there's a better deck that uses Jowgen locking. And the other options you have are like DDDs and Orphros or Requiem King that you give to your opponent, which in a format with Yubel, I don't think is that great, because your opponent can actually just tribute over those cards with the Spirit of Yubel, which is feels really bad if you give your opponent a card that's supposed to lock them and they just tribute summon over it. And yeah, there's Christia too, but like it's still good. It's still gonna perform. I just think in terms of the two fusion decks, I think Tiered right now has passed Branded as the best fusion deck. Although it's to be seen, and it's these two decks also depend on how popular Bystials are. Obviously, if Bystials get more popular because more people are playing Tier, then obviously these get hurt quite a bit more than the other decks in the top tier. So yeah, and then popular is just pure Snake Eyes. So pure Snake Eyes is like maybe the third best way to play fire decks, and frankly, I think it's still great. I think this pure Snake Eyes is actually better than a deck like Centurion, for example. With it's basically a deck that runs a whole lot of hand traps, like 16, maybe even 17 plus hand traps, but it has limited amount of starters now because of 2 Bonfire and like 1 Wanted and stuff like that. But it still has the Wanted extenders. It still has Diabellstar. Its end board is still good. Appaloosa, IP, SP, those are all still legal in Master Duel. So yeah, I think this is like the best form of like all those mid-range type decks. But obviously it's not as good as the other fire decks, just because sometimes pure Snake Eyes just does not have the amount of actual starters that these two have. And like, honestly, very few people play pure Snake Eyes when Fire King Snake Eyes exists. So it's a deck that just isn't even really represented it. And then Voice's Voice. So Voice's Voice is kind of it's kind of weird to place Voice's Voice because it's a deck that's very good at going first and not as good going second. So it's kind of like a hand trappy type of deck. And the advantage of Voice's Voice is that out of all these decks, it probably plays the best into Maxi. So that's definitely a positive. And there's people that are Jowgen locking with Verte with Voice's Voice because sometimes they feel like the end boards aren't high enough ceiling, so you need to just lock down your opponent with a Floodgate. So that's viable. But some of the matchups with like the higher tier decks don't feel very great with Voiceless. There's Yubel, there's like always the Nightmare Pain problem, which is like it makes a attack position Skull Guardian a liability. And then there's decks like these that aren't hand trap decks. Voiceless Voice going first is very good against hand trap decks, but against the board breaker decks, they can generally present an issue where they can play through your board more easily because your board isn't the most oppressive, like a Yubel, for example. And if the main strength of your deck is that being able to ignore hand traps, but your opponent's on board breakers and they're playing a deck that has a lot of gas, then that might be an issue as well. But yeah, Voice's Voice is okay. It's never going to be really the best deck in my opinion, but I mean, if you just win enough coin flips with Voiceless, it's going to look like a very good deck. Cashier. So the Cashier is one of the shifter decks. Okay, so shifter decks. Maybe I'll put them here. The thing with a Cashier in particular is that it's really hard. Cashier surprisingly gets hit by a lot of hand traps because it's so inconsistent. Like in Master Duel, and like sometimes an Inperm or an Ash will prevent you from getting to a Rise Heart in the first completely. Which then, if you're just sitting on like big dudes pass with hand traps, like that's not. It's okay, but it's if one of those hand traps is not shifter, then it's obviously like Fender plus Unicorn is not going to be enough this format. If we want to talk about the other shifter decks, so I think the better shifter decks are like Sprite and Vanquish Souls. And again, this isn't taking into account the World Championship the World Championships where Vanquish Souls actually took 2 spots as shifter decks. But yeah, I just think Sprite is way better at playing through hand traps than Cashier is. Like one hand trap usually doesn't stop Sprite, whereas like one hand trap is often good enough to prevent an Arise Heart from hitting the field. You can still end on like a few interruptions with Sprite through a hand trap very easily. You have like Elf, Melfi package. If you run that, you have Jin Buster, you have IP, Carrot or Red. You can easily end on any combination of those, and then you can play Shifter on top of that. And I guess I'll discuss the other build of a popular build of Sprite that doesn't play Shifter. But yeah, I think if you were gonna play a Shifter deck, Sprite is probably one of the better ones. If not, then Vanquish Soul, just because Vanquish Soul can access the shifter more easily. You can try to sack into it with Heavy Borger or stuff like that. It's not unlike Sprite. It's not affected by Max C. In fact, a lot of hand traps don't really work very well on Vanquish Soul as opposed to stuff like Cashier. There are builds that are running like 3 Borger, 3 Caesar Valleys, which I know some Vanquish Soul players disagree with, but if you do play those, then it makes hand traps even worse against you. And we are in a hand trap heavy format, so that is definitely a viable way to deck build. And yeah, against stun, obviously Vanquish Soul is one of the best decks to play against stun, which unfortunately we'll also have to get to. Yeah, and then Flu is another shifter deck. So here's the thing about Flu. I've never been a Flu believer. I still think it's inconsistent as hell. But it got Swallow's Calorie from the last pack. And Swallow's Calorie is like basically, if you're gonna come up with a support card for Flu, Swallow's Calorie is about as good as it gets because it's consistency, sort of. It lets you add Rabina if you have one of the bad birds in hand. If you're like bricking on what's it called, Toucans and Strees, or even Eaglin for that matter. If you don't have Rabina, those don't do anything. But Swallow's Calorie lets you switch one of those for a Rabina, so that's good. And on top of that, it's a quick play tribute, so you can use it like Advent Adventure to dodge hand traps. So now, Inperm and Valor cards like that actually are not. They're still good when they resolve against Flu, but Flu has lots of ways to actually play around Inperm now. Ash still not so much. Sometimes Ash still hurts, and Droll, obviously if Droll is popular, then Droll hurts. But yeah, if a deck that already doesn't care about Max C can also play around Inperm consistently, that makes it that at least it makes it way better than it was before Swallow's Calorie. I'll say that. And rounding out the shifter decks, Exo Sister. So basically, I think the only benefit of playing Exo Sister is the fact that it's a shifter deck, and it's not. There's like 4 better shifter decks I just showed you, so I don't think Exo Sister is really like as a niche as the 5th best shifter deck. I don't think that's a very that's a very strong claim to anything. So yeah, I'll put it down here. Okay, so I mentioned Centurion before as like a deck that just plays the most hand traps and 1-card combos and stuff like that. I think it's worse than than pure Snake Eyes in that regard, because the 1-card combo doesn't get you as far as like a 1-card Snake Eyes Ash, for example, or 1-card Diabellstar. But it's still decent. It's still hard to win through an established Blazar if they have like 4 to 5 hand traps in hand, which they often will. Or you could build to play like Bestials to beat like all of these decks here, like Ubel, Tier, and Branded. But then obviously if you put in too many Bestials, then you will struggle more against like Fire King and the other fire decks. So it's give or take. You could play like you could play like super heavy samurai. Centurion is another option, although that means it makes imperm more awkward and it cuts into your hand traps slots. And really, one of the pros to playing Centurion is the fact that it has so many room for hand traps. But yeah, I think it's a solid it's a solid deck. Yeah, we'll put it here. Okay. Oh, I guess I should talk about the other Sprite deck, since I already mentioned Sprite. So the other way people are playing Sprite is like the Tri-Brigade Sprite deck, although it's kind of weird. Okay, so it's not a shifter deck, obviously, because you're playing the Tri-Brigade cards, but you're not playing Revolt, you're not playing Shareg, you know, Tri-Brigade cards, the classic Tri-Brigade cards. You're literally just playing Kit, like a small Tri-Brigade engine, as like Link 2 and level 2 fodder to help spam out more Link 2s. Like, you on your field, your end board also has a double Dragon Lord on the field, and you're playing as your main normal summon Dark Beckoning Beast and opening the Spirit Gates like normal, like Yubel and Sprite, since the Nimble engine got hit so hard. But you're also playing the Nimble engine because you're running Sprint, and since you're not playing Shifter, you can make use of that. So you often end on like a one extra interruption than the standard Shifter Sprite builds. So that's another way to play Sprite. And people have topped the World Championship qualifier and gone top 10 in the rating duels with this version of Sprite too. So maybe this is actually the better way to play Sprite, because pure Sprite with Shifter has surprisingly gotten less results than Tri-Brigade, than like ghetto Tri-Brigade Sprite. So yeah, maybe this is the better way to play Sprite. And yeah, now why don't we talk about Cyber's cards? So Mathmech. Mathmech. I think Mathmech is really well positioned. I did a video on the underrated decks, and Mathmech was like one of the top 5, because frankly, it's a hand trap format. Mathmech runs more hand traps than the average deck. It runs about as much as, say, Pure Snake Eyes or Centurion. But Circular is the best card, because Circular, as a 1-card starter, beats any hand trap. You know, even Snake Eyes Ash, as strong as Snake Eyes Ash is, it loses to an Imperm. And like, you know, the 1-card Centurion combos also do lose to one hand trap. They don't have an extender. But Circular, the fact that Circular beats Imperm, Valor, Ash, no matter like just one of those for free, is like insane in the hand trap format, because it makes your opponent have to have like 3 hand traps in order to actually stop you turn 1. So yeah, that's neat. The only problem is it kind of dies to Max C, and if Bishios get popular, then this will definitely drop down, because obviously Bishios hurt Mathmech a whole hell of a lot, unlike Snake Eyes or Centurion as much. So we'll see. A lot of these decks placement are depending on how strong and how common Bishios are. Because if Bishios are strong, then a lot of these decks will drop down a little bit. But if they're not, then this is about as high. Then they can be a bit higher, like I placed them here. Let's see the other Cybers decks. So personally, I think Adagnister is a better deck than Mathmech. It's just Adagnister is really hard to play, and there's like nobody really plays Adagnister. It's not as weak to Bishios. It puts up, in my opinion, a stronger end board than Mathmech, and it has more starters. And the only thing is that it has like maybe a couple less slots for non-engine, although you can definitely give up some extenders to play more non-engine and more hand traps. It's just that this deck's really hard to play, so it's obviously going to be seen less, even though I think when played properly, it's probably better than Mathmech. It's just, you know, in a long 20-70 hour grind, however long you're playing the grind in stage 2, there are advantages to playing a simpler deck than the one that's a lot harder to play. And Salad. So Salad Magrate, I think Salad is unfortunately it's probably down here somewhere. I think it's Salad is of the 3 Cybers decks. Salad Magrate is significantly worse than Mathmech and Adagnister are this format, because being a fire deck and having your main destruction being like forms of forms of destruction removal is kind of a liability that I've realized now against Fire King Snake Eyes. Jesse brought this up, and it's something that I didn't even consider because I haven't played that much Salad, but when you do your combo involving Weasel, giving your opponent a monster, and then popping it from Reaping Princess, if your Fire King opponent has a Garunix, when that happens, you just let them full combo on your turn because you procced your Princess, and by popping the card that you gave them, and like what is this, like tier 0 Tournament of Shizu format? Like, come on, that's awful. That feels bad. It's the fact that you could just randomly lose when you're against the best deck in the format when they opened like one of the cards in their deck. But yeah, also like just straight up destruction, like Rage or Pyro Phoenix. It's weird to time, and it's like a lot of times it's not as great in the Fire King. Rage is okay. Rage, at least you can pop the Sanctuary and the Fire King at the same time, so that's okay. But like Pyro Phoenix is never really even good now, so I don't think the Code of Soul builds are even that great this format. So yeah, it's a lot of reasons why Salad Mangrave is significantly worse than the other two Cyber decks, in my opinion. Heroes. Okay, so this is like, yeah, I still think Cash is better than Heroes for Dark Law Turbo. Yeah, there's, I don't know. Heroes, I don't think Heroes has changed since like the past how many months since they got the Wake Up Elemental Heroes, or Wake Up Your Heroes, whatever that card is, and yeah, the meta hasn't gotten better for it. I'll say that. Stun. That's like, as much as I hate to admit this, Stun is, man, Stun is like the most popular deck on Master Duel. I hate it, yo. The aggravating thing is that it's not even good, and you know that whenever you win the coin flip against them, you're like 90% favor. It's just when they go first and they normal summon their False Line and set 4, you're like, well, it feels like fuck me, I guess, right? Yeah, this is definitely still a deck that you're gonna see, and it's only been increasing popularity over the months. That says something about the state of this meta right now. Runic. Okay, Runic cards. It's Runic has problems in Master Duel. We all know. One Fountain, lack of room for non-engine. This is every Runic deck I'm putting under this deck. This Runic Fountain, by the way, like Naturia, Bestial, Goatee, Plunder, Generator, Lightsworn Runic, all of them have the same issue. Like, it's like they're all built like the same way, with like very little non-engine slots, and then one Fountain that's very vulnerable to getting hit by an SP that's literally everyone's deck. It's, yeah, and then like the limits, like you're drawing a bunch of golden droplets and a bunch of like Spiting Storms. Thank you. Those were definitely the problem cards in the Runic deck, in the Runic Stun deck. But yeah, it's broke here. I don't see it moving up anytime soon unless cards for it come off the limited list, which I really doubt they will, because Master Duel doesn't like the Runic cards. Labyrinth. So Labyrinth. Okay, so Labyrinth has some issues. Okay, mainly the main issue about Labyrinth is that look at all these top decks. Okay, most of these are such bad matchups. You got Fire King Snake Eyes, you got Pearly, which I know a lot of people don't play it, so it's not as common, but man, Pearly for like most conventional lab builds is a nightmare, because they have infinite chain blocks for your Lady Lab. It's never gonna set anything, and then they can just easily play through all your disruption going second because they have a bunch of extenders. Yeah, and then obviously Tyr and Brandon are famously just terrible matchups for Labyrinth if you don't access D-Bearer, which is hard to do in those matchups if you're not running 3 of it, which I don't know what down bad Labyrinth players main decking 3 Dimension Bearer, but you do you, I guess. So yeah, and we also didn't even get linear equation. We didn't get what's that card called? Simultaneous equation cannon, that massive board wipe. Yeah, like the room is the best we got here, and then the furnitures are still limited. I don't even know if the furniture is the correct build to play. Maybe you play a build like Josh did, which just plays like heavy Storm Dusters and Unending Nightmares to hit the U-Bell matchup at least, but that still doesn't solve the problem against every other matchup. I guess it's good against Rescue Ace, but again, Rescue Ace is also not popular enough to justify like Labyrinth. Like It's just a bunch of bad matchups. And Dragon Link is back. Dragon Link, another awful matchup for Labyrinth because it plays the most Bishios in the game, which you don't want your fucking furniture and your ladies getting Bishio. It's yeah, like the deck hasn't gotten any buffs or anything, and the meta has just gotten worse and worse for it over time. What is the Supreme King? So Supreme King. I don't. If this is gonna be like the Pendulum deck represented here, I think Supreme King is probably the best Pendulum deck because it's the only Pendulum deck that can run any amount of non-engine in this format. So it has that for going for it. But I mean, it's still kind of weird. It doesn't like it can run non-engine, but the amount of non-engine it runs is like 12 or 13, which is obviously it's less than these decks up here are all running. So even then, it's and then it's like everyone's playing around pendulums. Like the imperm, your opponent drawing an imperm just holds you back so much because everyone sets them in the imperm column. Yeah, this deck is okay. It's just it's like a deck that's like a 1-2 card combo deck with hand traps, but all of these are also describe that kind of gameplay, except all of these can run more hand traps than Supreme King, so it's okay. It's a viable deck. It's just a worse version of a lot of decks that are already in the meta right now. And Infernoble Knight. So Infernoble Knight, it's like plants. It's like I don't know which one is better now, whether plants or Infernoble is better, but yeah, just go first Wombo combo and FTK your opponent. That's it. Going second, bit harder, bit more of a struggle, but you know just secure your win half the time when you win the coin flip. That's the strategy with these decks. And Dynamorphia, I put this here before. I think this format is so bad for Dynamorphia. It's like same problem as Labyrinth. Like terrible matchup for Dynamorphia. Branded awful matchup for Dynamorphia, especially if they run Super Poly, which not all of them even do anymore because Super Poly is not that great. But if they are, well, I mean, there's nothing you can do about that. Yeah. Also, Ubel, awful match for Dynamorphia. It's yeah. This is not the format to pull out this deck in my opinion. Let me go over some decks that came out. The other decks that came out last pack are like, what's it called? Ice Barrier and Raid Raptor. Okay, so I overestimated Raid Raptor a lot. I underestimated how bad Raid Raptor is into Maxi, and like how sometimes it doesn't play around hand traps the best, and so on and so forth. And then I realized that Raid Raptor gets owned by Ubel because Ubel, the fan of Ubel's effect, goes through Towers protection. So you can literally negate Towers with Fan of Ubel because it negates the effect, not the monster. So even though you have a Towers, you're still getting your shit negated by Fan of Ubel. Like, what the hell is that? And then they attack into you twice, and you just lost. So maybe Caliuga is the correct way, just because you don't want to get OTK'd by Ubel going second. It's like I don't know. This this meta once again Ubel causing problems for just random niche decks in Master Duel, and Ice Bear. This ain't the Water Wind event. I'll just say that. Yeah, you're because of the amount of hand traps, you'll very rarely get to the Spellbreaker Cold Wave Floodgate thing, and without that, this is just like another deck that runs a bunch of hand traps, except this deck has mainly 2-card combos instead of 1-card combos, and it's more vulnerable to hand traps, and yeah, it's not the best deck, but I mean, you could use this to get to like Duelist level max. It's not like unplayable in the Duelist Cup format. Like I'll say this right now, because this is a Duelist Cup. This is a Duelist Cup focused tier list. I'm putting Pillow down here. You are fucking insane if you decide to grind stage 2 at all playing Paleo. Like you are Not even Joshua Schmidt will grind tier 2 of a duelist or day 2 of a duelist, stage 2 of a duelist cup with paleos. That just ain't nobody got time for that. Okay, it's just yeah. Mikanko. So Mikanko. It's weird. So if we were just talking about blind second decks, I might even put Mikanko maybe even below Ancient Gear, or like at least around the same level. The thing is, Mikanko is not just a blind second deck, so that's why I'm putting it above the pure blind second deck in the Ancient Gear, because honestly, the most successful versions of Mikanko have been going first versions. Whether it's just straight up pure Mikanko with a couple of floodgates, or the 60 card Warcrime Infernoble pile, which in my opinion is just worse than it's just worse than regular Infernoble, because you're playing the 60 card deck that loses the maxi as opposed to the 40 card deck that loses the maxi. But I mean, it worked for some people. You know, they got top results with that pile. So yeah, it's just none of the ways to play Mikanko are especially top tier, but it just has a couple of different ways to play it depending on the meta. So right now, blind seconding isn't that good, but at least you can at least play Mikanko as a go first strategy, which I'm not quite sure you can do for Ancient Gear. Speaking of decks that don't have go first strategies, Sky Striker. So I don't love Ray like that, and yeah, playing a deck that can really only win blind second now because you know they banned Kaiser Coliseum and other floodgates, but yeah, you can. I heard Ryan and like Team 7 talk that there is a way to build Striker to specifically beat like Fire King when that involves playing Soul Release. So blind seconding and Stop Fire King doesn't exactly have spell trap negates, so Thrust is really good. But if your opponent is good, then Sky Striker is bad because they'll just never play into Thrust. Like, and if they don't play into Thrust, your deck doesn't really do much. Like you can like hard open engage or something, but like a lot of your other cards aren't that threatening. So in order to be able to bait out a monster negate even in the first place, so yeah, this is it's all right just because you can run a board breaker suite similar to like that of an Ancient Gear. Yeah, but I don't actually know if it's better than Ancient Gear because this is a blind segment that also struggles to OTK compared to Mikanko and Ancient Gear. At least those decks can OTK, where Striker is like even if you have to out their board, and then even then you don't end the game, so they still have another chance. So if they if they like search follow up, there's also that problem. So yeah, it's yeah, I don't know where exactly to put this. I think I would think Striker is like the worst of the blind second decks, but that's just my opinion. That could be wrong. I'm not that familiar with all of the blind second strategies right now, just because none of them feel really that great this format. Monodium. Okay, so Monodium is like it's like in the same camp as like the plant deck and Infernoble, whereas like just go first and just auto win and put them in an unstoppable board. That's it. It's a little better actually going second than these decks, so I'll put it there. Although sometimes it runs less non-engine than these decks, but you have like 12 slots, so it's not the worst. But yeah, Monodium also is one of those decks that underratedly has like a decent win rate in Master Duel. It's just nobody plays it. But the new selection pack new secret pack from Monodium is out, so this deck is actually somewhat affordable now. I won't say it's cheap because you still need a lot of URs, but at least you can roll for a secret pack to pull Monodium from. And Super Heavy Samurai is like, man, Pure, I still don't think Super Heavy Samurai Pure really works because it doesn't have enough starters, but there's some heinous hybrids that I've seen play. You know, the World Championship, the Super Samurai FTK, that I don't recommend doing that. That was specifically for a format where they know they could queue in against decks that don't play hand traps and then put an FTK against it. That's not the case for ladder. Don't even try that. I don't want to face you playing a Super Heavy Samurai FTK. But I mean, there are, you know, there's aforementioned Super Heavy Samurai Centurion. There's Super Heavy Samurai, what's it called? Super Heavy, the 60 card Synchro Warcrime pile junk speeder with a Super Heavy Samurai, and yeah, it's still not really sure what the best way to play Super Heavy Samurai is, but if I go second against this, I know that I'm losing because I can't. I'm gonna draw one hand trap, which is not gonna be enough versus them. That's another thing. The Super Heavy Samurai always lets you play through one hand trap. So in a hand trap format, that's nice. As long as you draw a starter. Sometimes you don't draw Wakaushi or Soul Piercer because they're Soul Piercer, Peacemaker. No, Soul Piercer. That card is kind of hit on the ban list. So uh yeah, and also, not being a deck that can't play Called By, that loses the Maxi is kind of weird. Unchained. I don't even know how to classify Unchained. Okay, so I'm seeing a bunch of Unchained decks that are just playing U-Bell cards in it. So like, I don't even know if they're if I mean, I guess it's a deck, but obviously if you're playing U-Bell cards in the Unchained deck, then yeah, it's gonna be good. But it's also mainly a U-Bell deck, so I don't. Unchained has had according to stats, like Unchained has a decent win rate. It's just hardly anyone's playing pure Unchained. That I'm not even sure if the sample size is enough to call it like an actual like decent deck, or if it's just random sample size, like one guy playing Unchained that's doing very well with on ladder. But it's theoretically, it doesn't seem like the worst meta for Unchained, besides Maxi. But Sword Soul. Okay, Sword Soul. This is you're not playing Sword Soul for day 2 of or for stage 2 of Duelist Cup. You're just not. Come on, man. Like be serious. And Pure Fire King is also like, I don't know. Like, I want to put Pure Fire King here because there's almost no reason to play Pure Fire King or Fire King Snake Eyes. Like, in my opinion, it's why would you willingly not play Bonfire and Snake Eyes Ash and Snake Eye Poplar? I don't know. Like, Dive Elstar, sure, I guess you don't have to run that card because it's not a fire and it costs a discard, but at least like run the Snake Eyes card. The Snake Eyes card, there's no downside to running the Snake Eye cards with Fire King, and it's just free extenders and free starters. And frankly, opening Poplar is better than opening Ponix, which you're cutting copies of Poplar for Ponix by playing pure Fire King. I don't know. It's like there's a reason we haven't seen this deck really played at all, because it just doesn't make sense deck building wise, in my opinion. But, yeah. So here's about roughly what the list looks like, in my opinion. Again, let me know if there's any decks I'm missing. I'm sure there are. Let me know if there's stuff you disagree with. I'm sure there are. And let me know in 2 weeks what the hell I got wrong from this after the Duelist Cup, because I'm pretty sure there's quite a lot from here too. So yeah.